Hi, I'm Michael Hyatt. And if you're a coach or you're thinking about becoming a coach, I've got something important to share with you. Now, when I first started business coaching, honestly, I was scared to death. And the reason why is because I didn't know what I was going to talk about for 50 minutes with my coaching client. That seemed like an eternity. So, over the years, I've developed a six-part framework, actually, six questions, that serve as the agenda for the call. These have never failed me. I use them with every client every single time. And by the way, if you have a direct report, an executive assistant, or somebody in your team that reports to you, these are very effective to use in those one on one meetings as well. Now, I have all six questions in a pre session worksheet, which I send to the client 24 hours in advance. And there's a notation at the very top of the worksheet that says, look, give me top of mind what you're currently thinking. If this takes you longer than 5 minutes, you're doing it wrong. Now, I do want their off the cuff, top of mind thinking because that's going to be the most relevant, the most current, and is going to be helpful to guide our session. Okay, you ready? So the first question is this: what were your top three wins since the last time we talked? Now, I'll tell you why this is important. Because all of us as humans have a built in negativity bias. We tend to focus on the problems. Why? Because, throughout history, we've tended to survive because we focused on problems and came up with solutions. Well, that's okay. And that's what most of our clients get paid to do, is to solve problems. And particularly if they're business owners or entrepreneurs, they're going to have a negativity bias that's like super amplified because their survival as a company is related to this. Now, that can be helpful. It can serve them, it can serve you. But here's the problem: it doesn't build confidence. And if you focus exclusively on the negative, you're going to be very unsatisfied in your business and in your life. And you've got to round that out with the places where you're winning, the positive things, which frankly our clients tend to forget. They're winning more than they think, and we have to remind them of that. Now, it's important because I want them to take on bigger challenges and to scale their business. But they're not going to do that unless they're operating from a place of confidence. So this is the first item in every session, is to get them to make that mental mind shift where they realize they're winning, they realize they've got momentum, and they're willing to take on bigger things for the future. So what were your top three wins since the last time we talked? Okay, question number two. And I like this. Think of this as kind of a thermometer. If you went to your doctor, they get all your vitals. This is one of the vitals that's critically important. What is your outlook on things right now? And I have them rate themselves from 1 to 5. So let me give you the definition. This is right on the worksheet that they get. If I'm, just talking to them without the worksheet, which doesn't happen anymore, but in the early days, as I was formulating these, that's what I did. I would just describe what each of these numbers means. But now it's on the worksheet. So here's what I say. Number one, I'm stuck. I'm feeling overwhelmed and discouraged. And you'd be surprised how many of your clients feel that, but they have no one that they can share that with. So I'm stuck. I'm feeling overwhelmed and discouraged. Number two, I'm struggling. And I frequently get this one, but they say, I'm feeling like it's 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. And I'm sure you can relate. I definitely can relate to that. Number three, I'm making progress. However, it's slower and or more difficult than I expected. Now, that's true, honestly, for almost everything your clients are going to take on. They're going to underestimate how much it's going to cost, how much time is involved, how much effort it's going to require. That's true for all of us as humans, and it's not unusual for people to give you this kind of response. Number three. Okay, number four, I've got momentum. I'm making steady progress on important projects. And I really want to see my clients get to that level on a consistent basis, but it takes work. And again, sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Number five, I rarely get this, but I love it when I do, where they say, I'm on fire. I'm winning at work and succeeding at life. So what this helps me with is to kind of take their temperature, gauge where they are right now, and where they may need some help. And it gives me a little bit of insight into their mindset. I never shame them. I never say, well, wow, that's too bad, or whatever. I mean, it is what it is. And I always try to normalize it. So even if they say they're struggling or they feel like they're failing, that's normal. That's just part of the journey as a leader, as an entrepreneur, whatever your clients are doing, that's normal. It's part of the human condition. Okay, number 3, and this is an important question too. What are you currently excited about? Again, I'm trying to shift their focus. I'm not trying to ignore reality where they're struggling or where they've got problems or where things seem to be falling apart, but to realize that life is a balance. There are things also that you're excited about. And as Tony Robbins says, where your focus goes or where your attention goes, your energy flows. And so I don't want them to get so focused on their problems and not focused on the things that they're excited about that all their energy is going to the problems. Okay? Number 4, how far did you get with your commitments from our last session? Now, I end every session with a summary of the commitments they've made. And when I send the session notes to them as a follow-up to our coaching session, I include those commitments. Now, we also, Jim, my assistant, reminds them 24 hours in advance of our next coaching session what their commitments were from the last time so they can make sure that they follow through. Now, this is a matter of personal integrity for them. Can they give their word to something? Can they commit to something? And then can they make themselves do it? That's integrity. Can you make your actions conform to your words? And I want them to develop that skill. And part of the value of having a coach is the coach holds you accountable. And that's what I try to do with my clients. Now, again, I don't try to shame them or I don't allow myself to shame them if they didn't follow through on their commitments. No problem. But let me just ask you a question. This is what I ask them. I say, is this still relevant? Is it something you still want to have on the commitment list? Or is it no longer relevant and we should just take it off? Because there's no sense keeping it on the list if they're not going to do it or if it's no longer relevant. Okay, question number 5. What are you currently putting off or avoiding? In other words, where are you stuck? This starts to get to the heart of where they need help. And usually the reason they're stuck, usually the reason they're procrastinating is because the problem is just too big. The next step seems too big. And sometimes you just have to chunk it down to a simple next step. And oftentimes that's a phone call, that's a little bit of research, that's an email that they need to send or a text message they need to send to just get the process started. So I tried to chunk it down to something smaller by getting clear on what the next actions are. The number 6, what is at least one item that you want to make sure we discuss? Now, before I started asking this question, people would wait until we get to the last 5 minutes of the coaching session, and then they would bring up that one thing that they wanted to discuss, except that we were out of time because I usually do all my coaching on one day and I've got these booked back to back and I don't have time to go overtime. And I'm very, I was going to say rigid. Rigid is probably not the quite the right word, but I try to be very disciplined in ending the call on time for their sake, because they probably have other commitments too, and for my sake. And by the way, the reason I do a 50-minute call instead of a 60-minute call is I need to have a little time to summarize my notes, maybe take a bathroom break before my next call. So what is at least one item you want to make sure we discuss? And I try to hit this when we still have at least about 20 minutes left. So sometimes we'll get into it right away, but usually I want to go through the other questions and get their responses before we get to this one. And this is at the heart of coaching. What's the one issue that they need help on? And if you can help them with this one issue, the client's going to feel like it was a successful call. Everything prior to this was to set them up to win on this issue, to make sure that we discuss it, that we get clarity, they know exactly what they need to do to move forward. Now, if you let these 6 questions guide your conversation, I promise you, you will easily fill up the 50 minutes. I've never had the problem where, we get to the end or get to, 30 minutes into the call and it's like, wow, we're out of things to talk about. No, we're racing the clock typically. The 50 minutes goes so fast and they'll find it valuable if you go through these 6 questions. Now, I want to invite you to a webinar that I'm doing where I'm going to be sharing some of the coaching lessons that I've learned in becoming a 7-figure coach. And you can register for that webinar. It's totally free at fullfocus.co/lessons. Hope to see you there.